That day, when the phone rang for the third time, I was kneeling in the garden, hands covered in dirt, trying to finish planting the lavender bushes I swore had come back to life 3 times just to bloom in time for summer. But I didn't expect that the final drop of sweat I shed that day would be for someone who had just passed away. One phone call, and the entire world I knew collapsed. The only thing I could hear was a stranger's voice, but it carried the weight of a hammer crashing into my heart. "Miss Clara Winters, this is Nathan Bell, attorney for Miss Diane Harper." And then he said the sentence I knew I'd never forget for the rest of my life. "I'm sorry to inform you your aunt passed away last night." I felt the ground sink beneath my feet. My body was still in the backyard, but my soul, I wasn't sure if it managed to stay. I don't remember how I got inside. My trembling hands clutched the phone like if I let go I'd crumble into dust. Nathan Bell, a name I'd never heard before but that now rang like a funeral bell, was still speaking on the other end, his voice strangely calm, a stark contrast to the chaos inside me. "Aunt Diane passed in her sleep, very peacefully," he said, as if that would somehow ease the pain. "She left specific instructions for me to contact you before anyone else in the family, and—" He hesitated. "There's a letter meant only for you. It must be read before the funeral." I bit my lip. A letter? Before the funeral? What the hell was going on? Aunt Diane wasn't just an aunt. She was the only one in the family who ever saw me as a real person. The first to teach me how to spell using sticky notes all over the kitchen walls. The one who used to slip caramel candies into my hand whenever I had to endure those cold, meaningless family gatherings. The one who once told me, "Clara, the world will try to mold you into whatever it wants. But you have to be the one holding the mold." And now, she was gone, suddenly, without a goodbye. I sank into the kitchen chair, my heart throbbing like someone had stabbed it with an invisible knife. "Miss Clara?" Nathan spoke up after a stretch of silence. "Yes, I'm here. I need to ask, would you be able to come to my office today, as soon as possible?" "Yes. I'll be there within an hour." I don't know what made me say that, like I was accepting an invitation to tea instead of preparing to walk into a storm. Attorney Bell's office was on the 14th floor of a glass building overlooking downtown Portland. I had never stepped into a place that made me feel so out of my league. Velvet thick carpets, leather chairs softer than my bed, and abstract paintings on the wall that I couldn't figure out where to look. Nathan Bell stood as I walked in. He looked to be in his 50s, salt and pepper hair, impeccably dressed down to the cufflinks. His face showed experience, but also elegance. The kind of man who could kill a deal with a glance and still make the other side feel honored. "Thank you for coming so quickly," he said, shaking my hand, voice gentle. "I didn't want to delay anything related to my aunt," I replied, trying to steady my voice. "You said she left a letter for me?" Nathan nodded, pulling 2 envelopes from the drawer of a glossy walnut desk. One was large, with the Bell and Lowry law firm's logo. The other was smaller, ivory-colored, with my name written in the familiar handwriting, elegant, delicate and proud, of Diane Harper. I reached for the envelope, the faint scent of jasmine and sandalwood still lingering on the paper. My heart tightened. She always wore that perfume. It was the last trace of her, a whisper from the past. "She asked that you read this letter privately first, then we'll discuss everything else." I nodded, hands trembling slightly as I opened the envelope. Inside was a thick, small sheet of paper with carefully written lines. "My dearest Clara, if you're reading this, it means I've completely run out of time in this life. But don't be sad. I lived without regrets, exactly the way I chose. But I need to ask one final thing of you. It won't be easy, but no one else can do it but you. At my funeral, you will have to read a letter that will change everything. Forever." The letter is hidden in the secret compartment of the mahogany jewelry box, the one I once showed you how to open when you were 13, remember? The one your mother despised for being too flashy. Some may see this as revenge, but I call it justice. Late, but necessary. I'm leaving everything to you, Clara, the estate, the shares, the house. But it only takes effect if you fulfill one condition. Read that letter. In front of the entire family, no exceptions. I believe in you. Because you are the only one in that family who knows right from wrong. The only one not swallowed by greed. Oh, Diane. Peace. Don't let them bury me in a floral dress. I've said it before, flowers belong in gardens, not coffins. I read the letter over and over, 3 times, my throat tightening. She left everything to me? I stammered, looking at Nathan. Yes, he nodded. The total estate is estimated at around $64 million, including shares in Harper Innovations, real estate, investment accounts, and valuable artworks. And my family? There are a few small gifts noted, but the majority of the estate will go to you, if, and only if, you agree to carry out her request. I sat silently in the leather chair, those numbers echoing in my head like tolling bells. $64 million. My family is going to lose their minds. But what suffocated me wasn't the money, it was the unanswered question. What had my aunt been hiding all these years? And why did she choose me, the one almost always seen as the outsider, to reveal it to the world? The house sat at the end of a tree-lined road, roof dark with moss, off-white walls stained with time. Still proud, like the way Aunt Diane had always existed in a family full of pretense. I hadn't been back here in nearly a year. But now, every brick, every crack in the door seemed to whisper my name. I stepped out of the car, clutching my purse. Inside was Aunt Diane's first letter, and a clear address for what I needed to find. The secret compartment in the mahogany jewelry box, the one that used to make my mother frown because it was too gaudy. The iron gate creaked as I pushed it open. Even the sound of metal echoing in the garden made my skin crawl. The house was completely still, not a sound. The old housekeeper, Mrs. Kelly, had likely left after handling the initial funeral arrangements. I had my own key, one Aunt Diane gave me on my 21st birthday, along with a line I could never tell if she meant as a joke or not. In case someone decides to change the locks without asking. I opened the door. The scent of old wood and faint jasmine still lingered somewhere. I didn't turn on the lights. The sunset filtered through stained glass panels, enough to guide me to the second floor, where her bedroom sat at the end of a thick carpeted hallway. That room hadn't changed. Deep blue silk curtains, a slightly crooked picture frame that looked intentional, and right in the center of the vanity was the mahogany jewelry box. I'd touched it hundreds of times as a child, but only once did she show me how to open the secret compartment. I sat down on the velvet chair. My heart pounded like it wanted to burst out of my chest. My fingers traced the intricate rose carvings on the wood. The third petal from the left. That was the secret. I pressed it. A soft click sounded. A small tray slid out from the bottom of the box, revealing a thick, heavy, dark yellow envelope. On it, Aunt Diane's unmistakable handwriting. To be opened at the funeral, in front of the entire family. I took a deep breath and carefully placed the letter into my purse. Beneath the thick paper was something hard and sharp-edged. Maybe a photo. Maybe documents. Maybe something that could shatter a family. The next 3 days were a blur of chaos. My phone rang non-stop. Relatives, who never even remembered where I lived, suddenly started calling, asking questions, fishing for hints, as if they sensed they'd just lost a fortune they never got their hands on. I stayed completely silent. Not a word, not a hint. On the morning of the funeral, I wore a tailored black suit. No lace, no frills, no tears. I pinned a lavender flower brooch to my lapel, the only flower Aunt Diane liked besides jasmine. When I walked into St. Augustine's Church, dozens of eyes turned to me like needles. My father, Douglas Winters, stood at the front row. trying to hide his tension behind a forced smile. Beside him was Aunt Heather, Diane's sister, with a face as cold as wax. I knew they weren't there out of grief, they were there to wait for the will. And I was the knot in their plan. Nathan Bell approached me once everyone was seated. He whispered, "It's time, Clara." She wanted the letter read right after the priest's speech, before anyone can leave. I nodded. The letter in my bag felt like it weighed 100 pounds. As if it contained an explosion waiting to go off. The funeral proceeded with solemn formality. No one dared wear bright colors. Aunt Diane had been clear. "If anyone wears beige or pale yellow, I'll haunt them for life." The flowers surrounding the casket were all white jasmine and purple lavender. A longtime friend of hers spoke, sharing stories about the creative projects she once led at Harper Innovations, the company she founded over 30 years ago. Then the priest invited me to speak. The church was dead silent as I stepped up to the wooden podium. The sound of my heels echoed like a metronome of fate. I pulled out the letter, breaking the red wax seal with Aunt Diane's signature mark. A stylized, jasmine flower. No one said a word. But I could feel the eyes on me. Expectant. Suspicious. Fearful. I looked across the room before speaking, clearly. "My name is Clara Winters. My Aunt Harper requested that I read this letter at her funeral, in front of the entire family, and I will do exactly that." I opened the letter. Every word felt like it burned into my palms. "Dearest Clara, if you're standing at that podium, it means you've found the courage. And I believe courage is the only thing strong enough to face the lies that have gone on far too long in our family. You're holding in your hands a letter of truth. The truth I've buried for nearly 40 years. Not out of fear, but because I was waiting for the right person to tell it." Harper Innovations didn't start with just me. The true co-founder was Gregory Cross, a brilliant engineer, my best friend from college. He was also the man I loved. But he died in a car crash in 1987. "No. That's not right, he was killed." A gasp echoed from the back rows. I heard the sound of a plastic cup dropping, the sharp inhale of a woman holding her breath. The day Gregory died, a transfer file was submitted to the court, transferring all of his shares to my brother, Douglas Winters. "Your father." Gregory never signed it. I know, because that signature was forged. And I've kept the handwriting analysis report for the past 30 years. I stayed silent, because the company was still fragile. But now, Harper Innovations is strong. The truth needs to be returned to the one who deserves it. That's why I've left everything to you. The only one in the family who never bowed to power or money. I looked up, my eyes swept across the crowd. My father's face had turned pale. Aunt Heather's mouth was hanging open. A few people began whispering, like a storm about to break. I folded the letter, my voice unnervingly calm. My aunt left all of her shares in Harper Innovations worth approximately $67 million to me, with one condition. That the truth be revealed in front of the entire family. And I had done it. But I knew the real battle was just beginning. I didn't know how long I had stood at that cold wooden podium, under the eyes of hundreds exploding with shock, fear, anger and disbelief. Every word in Aunt Diane's letter still echoed in my mind like the toll of inescapable judgment. My father Douglas Winters was trembling, lips pressed so tightly they bled, as if opening his mouth would unleash something he could never take back. But I wasn't done. Because in my bag was still the heaviest part. A thick stack of documents wrapped in old leather, along with several black and white photographs, faded with time. I pulled out the first photo, holding it up for the breathless crowd. "This is Gregory Cross," I said clearly, my voice steady. "A structural engineer, my aunt's best friend from college, co-founder of Harper Innovations. And this," I held up the second photo, "is him with the blueprint, the original prototype of the self-healing bioconcrete, the technology Harper Innovations built its empire on for the last 3 decades. The third photo shook the room. Gregory and Diane, shaking hands. between them a handwritten contract, with the words, 50/50 ownership, Harper Innovations, LLC. I heard someone choke, a woman behind me started crying, and Mr. Bell, the attorney, sat in the front row, silently nodding at me. According to my aunt's letter, I continued, they built the company from the ground up. Gregory was the technical mind, my aunt was the strategist. They had promised to run Harper Innovations together, as two halves of one soul. I took a deep breath and pulled out a copy of the forensic report. My voice slowed, each word striking like a blade against wood. But in April of 1987, Gregory died in a car accident. The police ruled it mechanical failure, but no one checked the brakes. Until Miss Diane hired a private investigator in 1992. The results showed the brake lines had been cut with a specialized tool. The church erupted in horrified gasps. Aunt Heather nearly dropped her purse. Some of my relatives shot to their feet, mouths agape. But I kept going, my voice no longer that of the quiet niece they once ignored, but of someone carrying the weight of truth. 4 hours after Gregory's death, a legal file was submitted to the federal court, transferring all of his shares and founding rights to Douglas Winters. I turned toward my father. He was shaking his head, face ghost white, forehead drenched in sweat. "No, you don't know anything," he croaked. I held up the signature analysis. "This is the forensic handwriting report. The signature on that file was forged. And this is the comparison sheet with Gregory's real signatures. From bank documents, handwritten letters, and academic records. The person who forged it was you, my father. Douglas Winters." Chairs clattered loudly. A few people left their seats, too shocked to maintain decorum. Aunt Heather threw her purse to the ground and screamed. "No. You're lying, it's ours, this girl is a traitor." "I'm only telling the truth," I replied, my gaze sharp as a blade slicing through every word she hurled at me. "The truth you all tried to bury for 36 years. A deadly silence blanketed the room. No one moved, not a single cough. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears. I pulled out the final document, an amended will, clearly stating that all personal assets, shares and controlling interest in Harper Innovations were to be transferred to Clara Winters, that is, me, with a portion set aside to establish the Gregory Cross Foundation, a fund supporting young engineers in the field of sustainable construction technology. And I ended the speech like delivering a final verdict. Today, I didn't come here only to mourn, I came to return the truth to the one who was robbed of everything. And to rebuild what should have been his from the start. My father sat still in the front row, his eyes hollow. Every trace of life seemed drained from him. No one reached out to him, no handshake, no defense. Aunt Heather left the church immediately after. My two cousins, the ones who used to laugh behind my back at every family gathering, stood frozen, like they had just realized the throne they thought they'd inherited was actually a pool of blood. After the ceremony, I returned to my car, opened the door, but didn't get in right away. The Portland sky had turned a smoky gray, not raining, but suffocatingly heavy. I sat in the driver's seat, hands trembling uncontrollably. The final letter from my aunt was still tucked safely inside my jacket. I hadn't read it aloud. She had left me a message of my own. I took it out. "My dearest Clara. You did it. Not everyone has the courage to speak the truth a whole family tried to bury. I've watched you grow up, endure every stab in the back, every look of contempt, every cruel word. But I knew, from the moment you unlocked the secret compartment in that mahogany box when you were 13, that you were the one who would do what I couldn't. Not because I was weak, but because I had to wait for the right person. And that person was you. Now, do the right thing. Use what I've left behind not to build an empire, but to restore justice. With all my love, Aunt Diane." I folded the letter. For the first time in 3 days, I cried. Not out of sorrow, but because, for the first time, I saw a real light rising from the ashes of my family. No one moved. It was as if all of St. Augustine's had been locked in place by some invisible force. No one dared to shift, no one could speak. Everyone remained frozen in the aftershock of what I had just read. I could hear the wind whistling through the stained glass behind me, but even that sound was muffled by something heavier than silence. Truth. And that truth I had just dragged into the light, stripping away the prestigious title of Douglas Winters, my father. The man once praised as the founder of Harper Innovations. Now he was just a shadow, trembling on the edge of the front pew. No longer a symbol. No longer a leader. But a man stained beyond redemption. "You're making this up," a male voice rang out from the middle rows. It was Blake, my cousin, Aunt Heather's only son. His face flushed red, his fists clenched white. "Your father built this empire, no one can erase what he accomplished. Aunt Diane was delusional and left her will to someone who contributed nothing." I looked him straight in the eye, my voice sharp as a razor. "If I made it up, then why do I have a verified handwriting analysis? Why do I have photographs of the original contract between Gregory Cross and Diane Harper? Why is it known throughout the engineering industry that the original self-healing concrete patent was filed by Cross, not Winters?" I turned to Mr. Bell. He stood up and slowly pulled out another envelope. "We had the documents notarized before the funeral. All evidence has already been submitted to the Oregon State Business Court." Blake fell silent. Heather collapsed back into her seat like she'd been punched in the chest. "And my father?" He stood. No defiance, no challenge, no rage. Just emptiness in his eyes. "I did it," he said, his voice hoarse, so soft no one could believe they'd heard him right. "I forged the signature. I transferred the ownership. But I didn't kill Gregory." "The brake line was cut," I reminded him coldly. He looked at me, as if hoping I'd retract something, throw him a lifeline. But I didn't. I hadn't come to comfort. I had come to unlock the gates of hell they sealed shut 36 years ago. Reporters had already flooded in by the time the speech ended. Though the funeral had been announced as private, no one could stop a story this explosive from leaking. Flash after flash lit up the room, microphones shoved forward, and there I stood. A 34-year-old woman, who had never held an executive position, now suddenly the most powerful heir in the Pacific Northwest's construction technology industry. "Are you planning to press charges against your father? How do you think shareholders will react to this announcement? Do you intend to sell your shares or change the executive board?" I gave only one answer before stepping away from the mic. "I will not run, I will not stay silent, and I will not let a company built on blood continue to survive on lies." The post-funeral reception was suffocating. Every handshake I received now came not out of celebration but fear or calculation. Awkward hugs, avoided eye contact. My father disappeared without a word. Heather left after screaming in my face that I had destroyed everything. A few relatives came close, whispering things like, "Maybe you should reconsider. Family is still family." But I didn't answer. I was no longer the quiet girl at the kids' table during Christmas dinner, forced to smile at people who looked down on me, just because I chose to teach at a public school instead of joining Harper Innovations at 21. That night, I returned to Diane's estate. The living room still held the scent of white flowers and lavender. I sat in my aunt's armchair, looking out over the backyard, where the hybrid roses she once planted were still blooming, even as autumn had begun to knock. Beside me was the second file I hadn't opened in public, the one Aunt Diane had left for me alone. I opened it. Inside was a detailed list of Gregory Cross's assets at the time of his death, along with an unsigned transfer contract, clearly stating that his shares were to go to his biological daughter in case of an unexpected event. The girl's name, Samantha Cross. I froze. A name I'd never heard before, never mentioned at any family meeting. And next to it, a photo. Diane sitting beside a young woman with dark hair. sharp eyes that looked just like Gregory's. On the back of the picture, handwritten. She doesn't know anything. I paid for her college, her master's, and now her PhD at UC Berkeley. Clara, if you're reading this, find Samantha. She deserves to know who her father really was. I closed the file, my heart pounding. The truth wasn't over. It was like an iceberg. What I had just revealed was only the tip. And I knew the next thing I had to do was find Samantha Cross. A daughter of the man who was killed to build an empire. Someone who had the right to know that her father wasn't a coward who walked away, but a man, betrayed and murdered. Someone who might be an ally, or the next bolt of lightning to strike the ruins I had just dug up from the past. I found her at a conference in San Francisco, where young researchers presented innovations in biomaterial technology. She stood on stage, presenting a self-cleaning material that could neutralize toxic gases in the air into pure oxygen. The hall was silent, every eye fixed on her words. But I didn't hear any of it. I just looked into her eyes, dark brown, sharp and completely unaware of who she really was. Samantha Cross. She had no idea she was the daughter of Harper Innovations' co-founder. The man who was killed so someone else could climb to the throne. Through blood and betrayal. After her talk, I approached her, handed her my business card and said only one sentence. I have a story you need to hear. About your father. About the truth. We sat across from each other in a small cafe near the UC Berkeley campus. She didn't say much. Her eyes were cautious, her face tense. The look of someone who's learned to defend herself all her life. I placed a thick envelope on the table. This is everything I have. A copy of the original contract between Gregory Cross and Diane Harper, the forensic analysis of the car crash, and records of the anonymous payments Diane made to you for over 15 years. She opened it, and each page hit her like a blow to the chest. I didn't interrupt. Didn't interject. I just sat there and watched a person move from suspicion to horror to numbness from a pain she never knew she carried. This can't be real, she murmured. I thought. My dad abandoned my mom. She never said anything about him. I thought he was just some failed engineer. I even took my mother's last name. I nodded, my voice tight. He wasn't a failure, he was a genius. And he died because of it. Diane. My aunt kept this secret her whole life, but she didn't stay completely silent. She supported you, helped you study, protected you from the filthy power games my family created. Why her? Samantha asked, almost angry. Why didn't she say anything? Why wait until she was dead to reveal it all? Because Harper Innovations wasn't strong enough to survive the truth back then. If she had gone public, thousands of employees would have lost everything. Diane never chose to punish by destroying, she waited. To fix it a different way. I pulled out the final document. A certified copy of an amended will, official, court-stamped, from the state of Oregon. Diane left you 30% of Harper Innovations shares. As compensation. The rest, the controlling interest, she left to me. Not because I'm more deserving, but because I'm the only one she trusted to pass that control to the right person. Samantha stared at me in disbelief. Her hands shook as she held the document. In her eyes was a storm. Tragedy, justice, and opportunity colliding all at once. So what do you want now? She asked quietly. Do you want me to take your side? Or just forgive the past? I looked straight at her. I want us to rebuild. Just like Gregory and Diane dreamed. Co-lead Harper Innovations. Return it to what it was meant to be. Innovative, transparent, and just. I can't do that alone. But with you, Gregory Cross's daughter, I believe we can. 3 days later, Samantha walked into Harper Innovations headquarters in Portland. As soon as she stepped into the lobby, a wave of whisper spread like a shock wave. Her name had started appearing in trade news, shareholders gossiped. The board was in turmoil. But I stood beside her. And the first thing I did as the new controller of the company was appoint her as Chief Technology Officer, CTO, a position that matched her talent and honored the dream her father carried before it was stolen. The press conference was held a week later. I stood at the podium, Samantha at my side, flashes erupting like fireworks. I didn't hide anything. All the truth had come to light. Harper Innovations didn't begin with one person, but with two, an engineer and a strategist, Gregory Cross and Diane Harper. Today, we correct a mistake that's lasted more than 3 decades. I turned to Samantha, speaking to the entire press and shareholder audience. This is Samantha Cross, Gregory's daughter, the new co-owner of the company. Of course, not everyone welcomed it. Some old shareholders protested, called for investigations. A small group threatened to dump their shares. But the majority, especially longtime engineers, stood and applauded when Samantha stepped down from the stage and gave her first speech as the rightful heir. I didn't know who my father was, she said. But now I do. And I won't let him be forgotten in the shadows. I'm not here for fame or money. I'm here for what he and Diane started. Their dream will continue. And it will finally belong to the people who deserve it. That evening, Samantha and I sat together in Diane's garden, where I first found that fateful mahogany box. It was drizzling. The lavender was soaked. I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive fully, she said. And I don't expect you to, I replied. I just hope I'm strong enough to do what's right, even if it's heartbreakingly late. She stayed quiet, then reached out and gently touched a lavender bloom. Maybe. Beauty really can grow from where guilt was once buried, she whispered. I nodded. Diane used to say that, and she planted that seed in both of us. 3 days after the press conference, my father disappeared. No text, no call, no one knew how he left. His penthouse at River Place remained locked. The antique clock he loved sat quietly on the shelf, like a silent witness to his wordless exit. I didn't go looking for him. Not out of hate. But because I understood, he needed to disappear. A week later, I received a call from a rehabilitation center in Bend, Oregon. A social worker informed me that he had checked himself in for alcohol and sedative withdrawal, in a state of severe mental exhaustion. She said he didn't ask for any family to be contacted, only mentioned one name, Clara. I didn't visit. Not because I hated him, but because I knew this was the only form of redemption he could choose for himself. For the first time in his life, he wasn't hiding behind money, reputation or power. He was facing himself. And that alone was a punishment deeper than any sentence. Meanwhile, Harper Innovations didn't collapse as many had predicted. On the contrary, it came back to life. The media may have torn each other apart out there, but the real people behind this machine, the engineers, researchers and longtime staff, they stayed. They didn't follow me because of the Winters name. They didn't follow Samantha because of the Cross name. They stayed because they believed in the vision Gregory and Diane once set, to build a future that was sustainable, transparent, and just. And that's where we began. For the first 3 months, Samantha and I barely slept. We removed 3 former board members involved in shady contracts. We released a full audit of the supply chain, exposing corrupt intermediaries, and replacing them with partners who were more transparent and sustainable. I moved my office from the top floor down to the 3rd, on the same level as the research and engineering teams. Samantha turned the largest meeting room into a prototype lab. Every morning, we walked around the headquarters together, greeted employees, and listened to direct feedback. We didn't call it restructuring. We called it rebirth. The press scoffed at first. 2 inexperienced women playing idealists? A billion-dollar company now led by a high school teacher and a fellowship researcher. But 6 months later, when Harper stock rose 17% after landing a federal contract to supply biomaterials, the laughter stopped. We launched BioSkin to a surface coating that purifies air and resists urban corrosion. It was the same technology Samantha had once presented at Berkeley. This time, it was real, made by the very company her father once dreamed of. And we did it without hiding anything. All research, financial, and governance reports were published regularly, unfiltered by media teams. Every dollar was accounted for. The new company slogan was engraved in the main lobby. Not built to hide, built to be transparent. On the one-year anniversary of Diane's passing, Samantha and I held a small ceremony in the rose garden behind the estate. Only close friends attended. Veteran employees, a few engineers who once worked with Gregory, and some of Diane's old friends. We planted a new lavender bush and placed a small stone plaque beneath it. For what was buried, now growing back in the light. After the ceremony, I received a small envelope from the rehab center in Bend. It was a handwritten letter, the shaky handwriting unmistakably my father's. Clara, you did what I never had the courage to do in my life. I don't ask for your forgiveness. I only hope that if one day you look back, you won't see your life as revenge, but as restoration. And if you're living that way, then I haven't completely failed. Douglas. I folded the letter and placed it in the wooden drawer of my desk, next to Diane's worn notebook and the original contract between her and Gregory. Not to forget, but to remember. To remember that good things can be built from what's broken, if we have the courage to face the truth. Today, 1 year and 7 months since Diane passed, Harper Innovations was named one of America's 50 most transparent companies by the National Institute for Business Ethics. We weren't number one on the list, but I smiled as I sat in the auditorium beside Samantha. Two women with completely different pasts, yet sharing the same legacy. Not of money, but of responsibility. Samantha turned to me and whispered, "Diane must be smiling." I nodded, my hand gently clasping hers. She didn't just leave us a company, she left us a chance to do the right thing, and we didn't waste it. I sat alone in Diane's old library, which now served as my workspace whenever I wasn't at headquarters. The dark wooden shelves, the soft amber glow of the Tiffany desk lamp, and the faint scent of lavender from the cushion behind me. Everything remained just as it had been. Except for one thing. Diane was no longer here to guide me. On the desk was her worn brown leather notebook. The words she once wrote in purple ink were still clear. Do the right thing, even if it makes you lonely. I used to see that as a noble philosophy. But only now, after everything, the collapse, the betrayal, the light of truth, did I understand. It wasn't just an ideal. It was a survival reminder. I picked up a piece of paper and began writing Diane a letter. Not because I thought she could read it, but because I knew some things need to be said, for the heart to rest. Dear Aunt Diane. Today, the season has begun to change. The rose bushes in the garden have started to close, preparing for winter. But the lavender plants we once planted, they still stand tall, even as frost blankets the edges of the grass. I don't know if you'd be happy seeing everything now. If you were still alive. But I do know one thing for certain. What you left behind wasn't just wealth, shares, or a name. You left me a chance. A burden. A legacy heavier than gold, the truth. And the responsibility to live in accordance with it. Harper Innovations is still standing. Samantha is currently developing a new materials system for the Seattle redevelopment zone. The engineers call her the right hand of the future. As for me, I'm no longer the Clara Winters the family used to mock. I am the one who protects what my father denied. You know, there was a time I thought the truth would destroy everything. But it turns out, the truth was what saved it all. Not by erasing the past, but by facing it so it wouldn't be repeated. I'm not perfect, but I try every day. And I think that's what you hoped for most. Thank you. Not for leaving me a company, but for trusting me enough to hand over what no one else dared to carry. With love, Clara. I folded the letter and placed it in the top drawer, where Diane used to keep the first photo she ever took with Gregory Cross. That frame was still there. And for the first time, I no longer saw them as just shadows in memory. They were the ones who laid the foundation, who sacrificed, who were betrayed, but who also left behind their faith in the next generation. The next day, Samantha and I attended a national conference on sustainable development. We didn't go to speak, only to listen. But during a discussion on business ethics, a young student stood up and asked us, "If you could change just one thing in the company's history, what would it be?" I looked at Samantha, she nodded, signaling for me to answer. I stood up, my voice rising through the room like a promise. I wouldn't change anything. Because it was the pain and the injustice that helped us understand the value of transparency and honesty. Without the betrayal, we wouldn't have known what courage really meant. Without the wrongful death, we wouldn't have known what justice really costs. I paused briefly, then finished. My company isn't built on concrete or steel. It's rebuilt from truth. And that is what makes it unbreakable. That night, I returned to Diane's estate, standing in the garden where the rose bushes had already shed their leaves. I didn't cry. I simply closed my eyes, feeling the cold wind brush my shoulders, and imagined her hand resting lightly on them. Like so many times before, I heard her voice again in my memory. "Sometimes, Clara, we don't need to destroy to punish. We just need to let the truth find its way." And the truth had found its way. Through me, through Samantha, through everyone who chose to stay, not for money, not for glory, but for the reason this company was created in the first place. To do something good. A month later, we inaugurated a new workspace named the Gregory Cross Innovation Center. The bronze plaque at the entrance read, "For the dreams that were stolen. And for those who dared to seek justice, not with fire and swords, but with truth and conviction." When the cover cloth was pulled away, Samantha wept. I held her hand, no words needed. We knew we had fulfilled the dream of two people long gone. One late winter night, I opened an email from a young employee who had only been with us for 3 months. There was one sentence in it that kept me silent for a long time. "I don't know who you were before. But now, I just want to thank you for making this company a place I can trust to begin my career." I read it again and again, then smiled. Not out of pride, but because I knew Diane was right. Sometimes, legacy isn't in the numbers. It's not in the assets. It's in how we fix what was wrong. With everything we have. And everything we've lost. And in that garden, in the chill of late season, I saw a new sprout rising from the damp soil. Lavender. The flower of resilience. Diane once said, "True beauty is what grows from the most painful places." Today I believe she was right. Clara's story isn't just a journey of uncovering the truth. It's a reminder that the most precious legacy isn't money. It's the moral responsibility and courage to face the past. In a world where power and fame are too often built on secrets, Clara chose transparency as a way to heal. She reminds us that sometimes, healing doesn't come through revenge, but by rebuilding the right way, on a foundation of truth. What do you think about Clara's journey and the choices she made? Leave your thoughts below and share your reflections. Don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful real-life stories about family, justice, and resilience.